Innovation. It charges our imagination, fuels our progress, and builds bridges that span oceans. It turns our wildest hopes and dreams into reality. It powers our movement, creates new worlds to explore, and gives birth to new jobs in new industries. There's only one place and one event where the world's greatest creators and purveyors of innovation meet. This is where ordinary comes to die, and expectations are shattered. This is the 2015 International CES. Innovation is here.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage President and CEO for the Consumer Electronics Association, Gary Shapiro.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Brand Matters Keynote. Our Brand Matters program is specifically tailored for the advertising and marketing communities to discuss how technology and digital platforms are affecting marketing and brand strategy on a global scale. We are so delighted today to bring you an exclusive interview with CBS Corporation President and CEO Leslie Moonves, hosted by Michael Kassan. We are also delighted to have top executives from Condé Nast, Fox Networks Group, Google, McDonald's, and the Walt Disney Company here today to join the Brand Matters discussion led by Wenda Harris Millard. We are thrilled to have these leading marketing and media innovators joining us to discuss how technology is changing the way we do business and interact with consumers. We look forward to a very dynamic discussion regarding the challenges of navigating and the opportunities surrounding the intersection of media, marketing, technology, and entertainment. Leading the conversation is Michael Kassan, an internationally recognized business strategist. Michael is chairman and CEO of MediaLink, an advisory firm that serves companies at the convergence of media, marketing, technology, and entertainment. MediaLink strategically guides its clients through an increasingly fragmented media landscape. Michael Kassan has led the firm's expansion from strategic advisory into multiple business lines, including executive search, financial due diligence, agency benchmarking, and trade marketing. You know, since 2009, MediaLink has actually partnered with the Consumer Electronics Association to program and produce Brand Matters. Michael will introduce today's distinguished panelists to you. Please welcome Michael Kassan.
Thank you, Gary, and good afternoon. As you know, we're in Las Vegas, a city built on sin, Sinatra, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Don't get nervous, don't get nervous. When most of us think of these topics, we don't necessarily associate them with operational efficiency. However, that's what it takes to operate a business in the fast lane. Savvy improvements that drive tangible outcomes rather than vision statements and wholesale overhauls. The pings of the future cause the pangs of anxiety. If you believe everything you read in every panel you'll attend this week, the future is programmatic, content, native, social, local, mobile, FOMO, YOLO, and most important, real time. As Coco Chanel once said, elegance is refusal. The ability to look at the thousands of innovations we've seen here this week and understand how consumers will harness these tools is a critical question. Today, we have put together an amazing group of executives who adroitly navigate the needs of today's businesses and the potential of tomorrow. Whether to invest in scale or targeting, people or processes, technology or content, these are the decision makers. Within this portfolio of talent, it is an extraordinary honor to introduce a personal friend of more than 25 years and one of the best in the business, Leslie Moonves, a man whose remarkable career includes media consolidation, Web 1.0, the dominance of television, the death of television, reports that the death of television were greatly exaggerated, and whatever comes next. Perhaps better than anyone else of this generation, Leslie understands show business and as well the business of show. Above all, he always gets his rate upfront increases. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Leslie Moonves.
Thank you.
So Leslie, it's an honor to sit on the stage that Elvis Presley once sat on. I feel like it's a special moment.
But Elvis has left the building.
Well, not so much because, Les, I think it's arguably a statement I could make that you are network television's most spirited defender. And it's not surprising that you were also amongst the first to recognize that technology was not sort of an existential threat to your business, but actually a benefit. Could you kind of walk us through and riff for a moment, if you wouldn't mind, on that journey? I mean, you had to look at it and look at where it was going, and you've anticipated that, as I say, probably better than anybody in the world.
Well, as you said, for many years, people have talked about network television is dead, broadcasting is dead. You have taken over a bunch of old media assets, television stations, radio, it's dying. And I looked at us as in a very different manner. I said, we are a content company. That's how we win. That's how we score. And the next logical conclusion was, okay, you're in the network television business. You're building content. And by the way, we're also in the cable television business and the interactive business. And the realization, if we continue to produce great content, we have to get it to where people want to receive it. So look around you. Look at CES. CES is not, gee, those strange people that go to Las Vegas. CES is where the world is right now. And anybody who's in the media business, in the content business, and all those things that you mentioned, who is not aware that the world has rapidly changed, is sort of going to be left behind. The reason we were underestimated is people said, oh, you're in the old-fashioned business. You can't move forward, and that was just the opposite of what we were thinking. So as we looked forward, and it was due to a great deal of help from our terrific team at CBS Interactive, we said, all right, what are different ways we can use our content? And right now, we're as active online as we are on the air, and that is what our future is, And look, we're not the first to say it, but we're one of the first to execute it, is making sure our content is there, available for everyone. And you know what? It's not challenging our core business, it's helping our core business.
So, Leslie, your core business, and it's, historically, television, was about aggregating eyeballs and reaching that mass audience, and
right.
That's why they called it broadcast. We're in a world where one-to-one marketing has really turned marketers' opportunities and challenges on its ear. How do you reconcile the fact that we now can communicate one-to-one with marketers, and yet you're delivering that mass audience still 7 days a week, 24 hours a day?
Obviously, the CBS Corporation is still more than 50% advertising-based. So we still depend on getting the advertisers and getting them there. And once again, over the last few days, over the last few years, we talk about, all right, what is the value of all our different platforms? Look, The Big Bang Theory is still watched by 20 million people a week. That's terrific. We make a lot of money from that show. But by the same token, it's important for us and for our advertisers to have that one-to-one relationship. So they are not mutually exclusive. When you talk about some of the brand managers and the CEO of these corporations, and recently talking to the head people at General Motors, we still need the network to introduce a new product, a new car, a new line. But by the way, when people, they want to know the name of the product, they'll watch NCIS or The Big Bang Theory or whatever we have on the air. But when they want to take that next step, they're going to go online. They're going to go to see that. So I think our ability is to be all things to all people in different ways, and we can attract advertisers across the board, and that's what we're trying to do.
So, Leslie, you talked about You talked about the advertising and the importance of advertising to your business model. Nobody, and I think, I remember sending you an email in the context of this, nobody took a stronger position in the context of retransmission than you did. And you should be applauded by everyone on your side of the equation for taking that stand. And it wasn't about winning or losing, it was about the right thing. Winning is better, needless to say, but you took a very bold position. And I remember many of the newspapers in this country applauded you, and rightfully so, for that. The balance of those two things in terms of how we look at it.
Here we were in a universe where cable networks, basic cable networks, which were getting a small fraction of what we were getting paid by the MVPs a certain amount of money per month, and we weren't getting it. So there was a dual revenue stream that companies were receiving for having 1/10 of our audience, and we said that's not fair. We need that dual revenue stream, and frankly, when you look at basic cable networks that were getting paid more than we were by cable networks or by satellite companies, we said that's wrong, the model's got to change, and it has changed. And fortunately, we are now finally being recognized for that and getting paid appropriately. It's only fair if you have more eyeballs, you get paid more.
I think that's
Pretty
true.
simple.
And as we're talking about eyeballs, the discussions around the ratings, discussions around C3, C7, now C30, do you think those kind of shifting measurement arguments and windows are sustainable, or is there going to be a major reset? I mean, how do you see that
for
playing
us
out?
as a content provider, we don't care where you watch it or when you watch it. So the idea that right now with what's happening with DVRs and what's happening online, we just want it to be counted and get paid appropriately. So initially it was just paid for live viewing, then it was C3, now it's going to move up to C7. The idea is whenever you watch our show and whenever you watch our ads, with few exceptions, we should get paid full freight. Obviously, if an ad is time sensitive, like a movie company, that would be different. But by and large, our job, produce the great content, distribute it appropriately, get Nielsen or whomever to count it appropriately and let us get paid for it. And therefore, we can continue to do the great content, whether it's for the network or online or for cable.
So, Leslie, let's talk about storytelling. And again, I said this in the introduction. In a generation, there are those people who stand out. You stand out in this generation for taking the CBS network, which was, of course, as we all know, the Tiffany network. And when you got there, it wasn't quite the same color blue box that it had been historically. And you brought that
turned pretty brown.
And it turned pretty brown, and you turned it back into a blue box, and in a wonderful way. And not only because of your attention to detail, Leslie, but the truth is you're a storyteller, and you understood it. Before this, you produced television shows at Warner Brothers and Lorimar and places like that. So you understood, you made shows, you understood the importance of that. As we look at the proliferation of devices, and as we look at whether we watch it on our tablets, on our thing on the wall, that television, on our wireless devices of any shape and size, how does that impact the way the story is told?
You know, by and large, believe it or not, it's not that different. It really isn't. Whether it's news, whether it's sports, whether it's entertainment, it really is. As you said, it's about great storytelling. You know, look, what I love about what's happened today is for many years, technology and content were at war. You know, there wasn't a common language, there wasn't a common goal. Now that's all changed drastically, where technology and the content providers are working so closely hand in hand. It's really remarkable. And for many years, you know, we had one of our competitors got on a stage, and they're talking about all great new technology. And the reason for that is because their content was crap. So all they could talk about was how they would sell it out there. But we developed a phrase at CBS, which we've used before, which is wireless is useless if you're hitless. Meaning, if your content's no good, I don't care how you deliver it. You know, you still have to start with good content. That's not to say that technology has not changed to different forms of content now working, shorter forms of content now working, and different things happening out there. But at the end of the day, you still have to tell good stories. You still have to get people who are interested in your content, who want to come back for more and continue to watch it, and watch it in a way that it affects them, and therefore, it becomes more and more important.
So a term that many of the folks in the audience would understand, Leslie, you certainly do, is the overnights. As we look at again, back to the proliferation of devices, when you evaluate the success of a program, how does that evaluation change? And I'm not, again, talking about C3, C7,
right.
But, does the show have legs? Do you give it that second chance? And with the devices, does it make a difference as how you make that decision?
Oh, sure, it absolutely does. Overnight ratings are virtually useless right now. Right. They really are. They're basically unimportant. The trade papers still report them. We have to be more patient. Our information is now coming from so many different places over a much longer period of time that the idea of success or failure is very different. Social networking becomes a measurement that becomes more and more important. Look, we're looking forward to our new late night group of guys where we have Colbert and Corden coming on, who are much more user-friendly in social networking. That's going to make a huge difference to, I think, our ratings, certainly our advertisers. So measurement systems are sort of antiquated. It's changing drastically, and how we make decisions are very, very different than we used to.
So in utilizing the word antiquated, I love to tell this story. I told it on this stage once before, but I can't resist it. Milton Berle, 100 years ago, was on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and that was when Milton Berle came back with his show in the 60s. And it was over, and it was quickly over. And Johnny Carson said, "What do you have to say, Uncle Milton? You were the father of television." He says, "Look, I have a solution for the Vietnam War." He says, "What's that?" He says, "Put it on ABC, it'll be over in 13 weeks. So
I think we're all a little bit more patient, and I think the value of content is being more and more realized. And a word about content, I would say today truly is the golden age of television. And by that, I don't mean just network. When you look at what's on at HBO and Showtime, which is part of us, and FX and A&E, it's truly phenomenal how many good shows there are available now. It's never been better.
Well, when you talk about Showtime, when about 3 weeks ago, when the second to last episode of Homeland, a lot of people didn't realize it wasn't going to run when it was planned. I remember reading in the trades or somewhere that there was an uproar and Matt Blank was attacked by people who had planned their whole Sunday night around watching Homeland.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And you know what? It's because of the digital age that everything's changed in terms of content. People are able to get things. They're able to binge view. Netflix, Amazon, Hulu Plus, they've made a difference in how people are watching television. And these are all positive steps for the content makers.
And speaking of that, Leslie, the over-the-top, the OTT conversations, and you took a bold step not that long ago, really, right, for CBS in terms of, putting out there your strategy around over-the-top. Can you chat a little bit about how that, it's obviously potentially a major game changer in terms of the delivery of content.
Yeah, for a long period of time, our interactive guys, and Jim Lanzone and Mark Debevoise, approached me and said, look, we would like to put CBS content over the top, and these are the reasons why. And being the old school guy, I gave them 12 reasons why I thought it was a bad idea. I'm going back about 18 months. And they kept coming back and batting them down. I said, how is it going to affect affiliates? How is it going to affect our advertisers? How is it going to affect our relationship with the MVPDs? And it's the realization, A, there are 10 million broadband home only. So we developed and we launched CBS All Access, which obviously has the ability to catch up on all our episodes, watch them the day later, have the entire CBS library, and in certain markets, get the live stream. We did a similar thing with our news operation where we have a 24-hour news thing called CBSN, which we like to call the cable bypass news channel. Both of them doing extraordinarily well. And once again, as the defender of network television, I think it is certainly appropriate that we are at the forefront of the new technology and how we go over the top with our content. And I don't care where you watch our shows, just watch them. And that's why our strategy is working. It's important.
And when you say that, Leslie, I think it's fair to say, at least I speak from, kind of mother-in-law research, looking at my own viewing habits. I consume more content than I've ever consumed in my life. I access more music than I've ever consumed or accessed in my life. And I think I'm a pretty good example of people's viewing habits today, although much of it is watched on those devices, much of it is watched on the go, much of it is watched on airplanes, not on that traditional delivery mechanism.
And the fact that you and I are old guys, it doesn't matter as much before. It was an excuse that only 18 to 49-year-olds mattered. 8-year-olds matter and 80-year-olds matter. And we're proving that time and time again.
And Leslie, as you look at these innovation strategies and going back to the over-the-top, and again, the face-off that you went through in transmission and retransmission last year, or now I guess in 13. I guess it was probably in 13.
With Time Warner Cable.
Right. The negotiating leverage is now changing because if you're going over the top, you're in a different, I mean, it's not bad to have that arrow in your quiver.
Well, it is. The real reason for going over the top is not to be able to circumvent MVPDs. It really isn't. It's really to make our content available to people who are using mobile. But at the same time, the reason we had the leverage during those things is purely because people wanted to watch the NFL. And they wanted to watch our good programming, whether it's news and sports and entertainment and all that sort of thing. So that was the main reason. And in addition, this over-the-top offering offers the ability to watch our shows wherever you are, on your iPads, on your iPhones, wherever. In addition, obviously, it's not bad to say to an MVPD, look, there are other available means. There are alternatives to you. However, we like the ecosystem the way it is, and we want it to continue that way.
So as we talk about the ecosystem, let's go back to advertising. It is obviously CBS's most important revenue source, as you said. The onslaught of conversation around programmatic media buying and that which launched online, which will now be very relevant in the linear television and cable worlds that you live in, and radio. Right. Very, very important. How do you see that impacting the conversation, the relationship, that ecosystem we talk about normally? And Leslie, nobody does the upfronts better than you, all kidding aside. You do get your rate increases, but you're an entertainer at heart, and you entertain the audiences, and you make it interesting. But the dialogue that has historically existed between you and the agency
is very different. It's very different. It's expanded. All I can say, it's expanded. It's I was talking to somebody last night at one of the 8,000 parties that I attended here. And it was a major CMO at a major corporation. I'm saying, okay, let's say your company wants to spend $100 million. Why can't you come in and give me the $100 million? And I will make available to you. I will make available to you any form of medium that you want. And I will satisfy everything you need. Our network is strong. Our local TV stations and radio stations are strong. More importantly, as a growth mechanism, our CBS Interactive platforms are strong. We can devise a selling mechanism for you that will satisfy all of your needs. Now, he didn't write me a check right there, but he's thinking about it, which is the good news. Look, in terms of programmatic ways of selling advertising, obviously we have more and more inventory as each day goes by, as our audiences grow, as our interactive groups grow. We're looking for the best possible way to get our best rates and get our best advertisers in a place where they can succeed. So programmatic becomes more and more part of the dialogue. I know we're working with some of the various groups that are doing that, and I think that's only going to continue.
And as it continues, the opportunity for someone's machine to talk to your machine, that changes the equation a little in terms of legacy infrastructure models. And again, in terms of that direct conversation, because Leslie, there was a time when, and all kidding aside, a network CEO never got the chance to talk directly to the advertiser. You had to talk to the agency.
Right.
That's correct. Obviously at a cocktail party, you can talk to anyone you want, but at the end of the day, you could be punished if you spoke directly to the advertiser. That's changing a little.
Well, just like programming has changed, technology has changed, advertising has changed, the whole system has changed. The people who haven't grown along with it, along with every form of what our business was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 3 years ago, is out of business. They're not getting on with it.
So famously, I remember reading a quote that someone in this industry talked about when they visited Silicon Valley and talked about the magic. The magic of sort of the unknown value of advertising. The old, and God knows we don't need to go down the John Wanamaker road, but the 50% of my advertising dollars are wasted.
Right.
The question is which 50%, we all know it. There was magic in that, again. Mm-hmm. That magic is getting less and less magical because we do now know more and more about what people see, how they see it, where they see it. And we did something in New York in September which focused on what our Chief Marketing Officer, Dee Solomon, talked about, the loss of serendipity in marketing. So with all the capability of delivering the right content to the right person at the right time on the right device, do we run the risk, and again, you're a programmer, you're a content maker who runs networks and all those things, but you're a content maker at heart, Leslie. Do we run the risk of getting data ahead of ourselves in data to lose serendipity, to lose that moment of surprise and delight? And
Right.
Again, I will make this a shorter question by saying, in the old days, we talked for the auto manufacturers about finding that moment when somebody was, quote, in market for a car.
Right.
How about when I'm not in market for a car and I see a great message and all of a sudden I say, gee, maybe I should go get a new car?
Michael, data is spectacular. It really is. The more we know, the better our decisions are. Having said that, research only becomes part of your decision making when we put together a schedule for the network or we decide what's going to go our interactive channels. There still has to be the human element that said, you know what, this is damn good. This show works. This show works. This is going to reach. As I said, the data is helpful in knowing who to reach, but it can't control what you put on. It still takes the programmers, it still takes the writers, producers, and actors. It does take that form of magic to make a Homeland or a Big Bang Theory or a Game of Thrones. These are spectacular creations that data could never produce.
However, if you look at it, and I agree with that because that is the magic, Leslie, but as you make, and look, this is well known in the industry, there's no network executive that's more involved in the creative process than you are. And that's a good thing because it's obviously worked. You have the #1 rated television network in the world, and there's a reason for that, and continually enjoy that position. As Amazon taught us early on, the capability to predict what I'm going to want based on what I've done, how does that end up, again, without messing with the magic, how does that end up influencing your ultimate decision? Because you do have that green light in your hand. You have the ability to say yes or no.
Look, to ignore that research, to ignore what your public wants is silly. You know, data is great. As I said, I absorb every single piece of it that I can, and it does help influence decisions. It can't be the only influence of decisions because once again, you're putting out a piece of product, the product changes, especially in television. The good news in television, you could kill somebody off next week if the audience doesn't like them.
But in television, they come back
right,
sometimes.
They do. In movies, if they're there and nobody likes them, you're stuck with that. In television, you can change your cast for any given reason. So the utilization of this information is very, very valuable. And we do use it every day, but it is only a part of our decision making. And the day that stops is the day that machines will be making our content. And we can't let that happen.
I'm going to ask you two final questions, Leslie. The first one is when we talk about the social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter and the proliferation and Google Plus and the things that are happening on the social media platforms. I know you understand the value of that as it relates to programming. Are you seeing those platforms reach their full potential as it relates to programming for us to be able to share?
Not by a long shot. Not by a long shot. It's just, they're in, when you think about the length of, they're in their infancy. I think it's going to be phenomenal that people are having a dialogue about their favorite piece of content. And I think that's only going to grow and help us and continue to expand the dialogue all over the world. So I think it's a great thing.
Okay, and here's the loaded question, although I think I know the answer. How are the upfronts going to go this year, Leslie?
Well, it's not till May, and we're not signing, but of course CBS is going to be up more than anybody else. So that's the way it's going to be.
I thank you for being predictable, at least on the last answer.
Right. Michael, thank you.
Leslie, thank you very much.
Thanks, Al. Right.
I'd like to continue this conversation by turning it over to our panel moderator and my partner at MediaLink, Wenda Harris Millard. Wenda's going to be joined on the stage by an all-star panel of industry luminaries. Jay Rasulo, the Chief Financial Officer of the Walt Disney Company, Bob Sauerberg, the President of Condé Nast, Deborah Wall, the Chief Marketing Officer of McDonald's, Randy Freer, the President and Chief Operating Officer of the Fox Network Group, and finally, Margot Georgiadis, the President for the Americas of Google. Wenda, over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Now that Michael and Les have provided us with some invaluable insight, not to mention a little entertainment, it is time now to turn our star-studded panel their attention to discuss the implications of the intersection of marketing, entertainment, and technology from a variety of expert points of view. If recent activity and current consensus thinking are any guides at all, arguably the most ubiquitous implication is size matters. To succeed, does a brand, a publisher, or an agency have to think small or go big, or both? These questions have brought modern media leaders to a crossroads. On the one hand, the goal for most marketers is to create the apparatus and campaigns that allow for successful one-to-one communications. And so we have giant digital players like Google, Apple, Facebook, building their businesses on the ability to engage the individual by investing heavily in technology that delivers personalization. Precise targeting platforms that serve consumers what they want and only what they want based on what history tells us they want. As big as they are, these players are thinking small. On the other hand, the traditional media companies, virtually all of whom are engaged in an existential effort to re-engineer themselves as technologically enabled content companies rather than as magazine publishers, newspaper publishers, broadcasters, and so on. Their main tactic for doing this is acquisition. The gargantuan $67 billion bid by AT&T to acquire DirecTV and the $45 billion merger of Comcast and Time Warner both await government approval. The crucial need to invest in technology was the primary reason given by both parties for the short-lived Publicis-Omnicom mega merger. The motivation behind all of this often is to be able to respond to the reality that survival for these eminent media brands demands perpetual technological upgrade in a marketplace whose only constant is constant change. These seemingly conflicting forces give rise to a critical question. Are consolidation and personalization opposed or complementary? And a corollary. In a marketing ecosystem defined by granularity and customization, is consolidation the optimal way to compete? As Michael mentioned, our panel today is a group of experts from some of the largest and best-known names in media and marketing. They come at the subject from different, perhaps opposing perspectives, but they are all key players in this grand game. So let's welcome them now onto the stage. Oh, what are these? Okay, well, we're going to jump right in. on these questions here. When each of you, and this is jump ball, no particular order, but when each of you looks to invest in the growth of your business today, is one of the primary questions about investing in scale versus personalization? And if that's the case, how do you balance those needs? So anybody can start.
Well,
Jay.
I'll start. So for a large company, all of our panelists represent here today, I don't think it's a question of either or. I mean, the only either or is whether you want consumers or not. Because if you don't both propagate large brands that are scalable in a way that's meaningful to your company, then that's not the right direction to go. But today, I mean, personalization is part of our life. And if you don't personalize, you will simply not retain consumers. So it's not a matter of, do I go global or do I go large? Of course you go large, because otherwise it's not meaningful to do so. But you have to be ready to come whatever. Beneath that or as a companion, you have to be able to personalize the consumption of those global or national moves, in my opinion, certainly for Disney.
And
Deborah?
I'll jump in on that too. So as a brand, those are the key bets that we're looking for. So where we can have both also. There's not as many of those opportunities always as we want. So to give a shout out, we did a really interesting thing with NFL and Twitter where we were able to identify the 32 million fans, NFL fans on Twitter, serve something specific up to them, content that was engaging, and saw probably the highest engagement rate we've seen, like about a 30%. So those are the big wins, and we're looking for those across the board more and more frequently. And I think as we get to know the technology and can identify that, that's where we see win.
Well, we all need scale, and you can't really pick. They're not mutually exclusive. And so our strategy is we want to be the best. We're the premium player in the marketplace, and we're looking to have find the best way to get the best content connected to the absolute best consumers in the world. So we're not going to try to be the biggest, but you have to be big enough to matter, and you have to do both.
And I think
Margot,
that's...
you know about scale.
Well, I think what we're finding is that technology really enables us not to have to make a trade-off anymore. That we can really have scale and personalization at the same time, because as several of the other panelists were sharing, we do need to find that reach, right? That distribution for amazing content, but the ability, especially with the advent of mobile, right, to begin to understand a consumer's context and bring them something in the right time in the right place is unprecedented. And I think it's so exciting.
And they expect it.
They do.
Absolutely.
They really do.
Yeah. So Randy, do you think that the sort of consolidation and personalization, do you look at them as necessarily opposed, or do you see them as complementary?
I think they're definitely complementary. I mean, it all starts with a product, and then ultimately you have to decide what's the best way to get the product into people's hands. And consolidation and how we scale things is part of that. Personalization is part of it. I think it all comes together, and more now than ever, you have more opportunities to get things into people's hands. Distribution is becoming ubiquitous. You have the opportunity out there is amazing, and of course, it all starts with a product that has to have the ability to reach large audiences in the companies that we represent, or you shouldn't be doing it anyway. You shouldn't be spending your time on it.
Or as Les said, it has to be a quality product also. Right. So Deborah, from a brand perspective, certain mediums in which you spend your dollars offer the promise of reach, and others of very measurable engagement. How do you balance your media budget when you're thinking about how you spend? How do you balance those two, the reach and the sort of intimate, if you will, measurability?
Well, it is the key. I mean, we serve millions of people every day, so we have to find that scale, but it is that personalization. So that's why I do love those things where we can identify the content that's relevant, go on a large scale, and this has to be multiple millions of people, and then serve them up that very personal thing, and we always see higher engagement. The trick is how many of those can we find and how can we create more of those? So certainly on any of the sports and the real time, that always stands out as an opportunity. But that's where we see, we always say, of course at McDonald's we always say, we really want to have our Big Mac and eat it too, because that's exactly where we're going to get the things that really pay off. And that's what starts changing the media mix overall.
Before McDonald's, we've known each other for many, many years, and you had just an extraordinarily impressive track record in the automotive business. How do you look at how you engage with your consumer at McDonald's versus automotive? I mean, that's a quite different different sales cycle, shall we say? How do you think about that?
I think there's a basis that's the same. The customer, no matter what brand or what industry, is always at the center of all the decision making. We're always looking to be relevant. How can we engage more? And certainly, how do we bring that extra bit of value? Now, going from automotive to QSR, the pace, the frequency, we're eating 3 times a day versus you change at most a car once every 3 years. So my 9 months at McDonald's have been about 9 years in auto life already. I kind of equate it to that amount. But I think that whole game of scale but personalization and where we go is important. The idea of a relevant idea, a big, powerful idea that can motivate and be contextually relevant is always better than relentless activity. And that we're finding, I see as a big consistency. So that's part of why we're on a journey at McDonald's that's we're really working to transform, and we're looking for those big ideas. So the new campaign that you might have heard about that we launched, that's that idea of trying to stay on that core, big, powerful idea. Ours is a little more loving, can change a lot, and it can change a lot. I'm a better person every day when I think of that, and take us into that. So those principles really have stayed the same, and it's all about getting to those sales and getting your guests or customers to come in more.
Well, Jonathan Perelman said a few years ago, content is king, but distribution is queen, and she wears the pants. So Jay, you have been involved in arguably 2 of the biggest content acquisitions ever, Marvel and Lucasfilms, and very recently the acquisition of Maker Studios, the largest multi-channel network out there. So when you are looking at what you're going to buy next, do you look more toward content or more toward distribution?
Well, interesting. Each of those transactions had very different strategic purpose, particularly Maker relative to Lucasfilm and Marvel. And look, I think that we are in businesses, whether it's the theme park business, film business, the television business, where there are huge upfront investments in the creation of a product that by definition needs to be global to be successful, needs to spread out among all our businesses to be successful, and at a very deep level needs to move people to be successful. If they're not moved emotionally, then it is not going to have the characteristics of something that is a long-term successful play for us. And it's why our experience in the film business is very different from the average experience in the film business in terms of return. But there is absolutely if you can't get your product distributed in ways that consumers want to consume that product, then you better think long and hard about putting the investment in creating it in the first place. And whether that's buying very expensive sports rights, whether that's making a major motion picture for hundreds of millions of dollars, you've got to think in advance, how is a product that I want to be emotional, right? Sports is very emotional. So everybody sees the same game, but everybody's experience of that game is personal. So you want to figure out, and technology and different distribution platforms, including Maker, have allowed us to have personal experiences on broadcasted products. And that's true of our theme parks, it's true of major motion pictures, it's true of the broadcast of sporting events, where people follow along online, they get involved socially, they're watching on mobile devices while they're watching the broadcast game. They're on their, my ESPN as opposed to everybody's ESPN. And I think Maker is a very good example of how you can personalize products, because not only are people viewing things in short form, but there are actually 60,000 creators making things in short form. And that level of involvement is way beyond the consumer when you're actually a creator. So I don't want to be predictive about what our next acquisition will be. I will say that we feel pretty good about the content that we have between the unexploited opportunities with the Marvel universe, which I don't know has 8,200 characters and growing. They're probably making one right now. And the Star Wars universe, which has been so untapped for a decade. And of course, the depth and breadth of that universe is pretty big. By the way, there's also Disney and stuff we continue to create. And so I think that, distribution, we don't have anything in mind, but I wouldn't be surprised to see future acquisitions focused on distribution, the technology that allows that distribution, because, if we go down the road, I'm sure there are things that we haven't even thought about how to distribute great content.
And, Randy, 21st Century Fox has a history of successfully managing both content and distribution platforms, whether from the very large B-Sky B or your recent acquisition of Truex. What are some of the sort of key success factors in making this work within a large company?
Well, look, I think ultimately it starts with product. It does start with the content, and one of the things we've learned over the years is the direct relationship with the customer is very, very important. And you look at most of what we do today is wholesale a lot of our product. We're always selling to somebody. It's a much more business-to-business relationship. And we're really excited about the future because it gives us an opportunity to be much more customer-focused, much more in a direct relationship with that customer. There are so many people who love the 26 years of The Simpsons and everything else out there, but we don't have that one-on-one relationship with it, and we're going to go out and build and create and develop those relationships. And whether it's Sky and what we do over there, we've learned a tremendous amount, especially in the sports business. We're looking forward to some of their betting platforms and some of the other things. We're a good town for it, to come over so we can get more aggressive in that space. And again, I think that the main thing we've learned over the years is that customer relationship is really powerful, and it's something that we don't have enough of today in our overall business.
Bob, I want to talk a little bit about Condé Nast and some of the acquisitions that you've made. There was a lot of skepticism, I think it's fair to say, when Condé Nast purchased Reddit, but it has thrived under your ownership very clearly, and it's become a cultural phenomenon. What did you do right there?
Actually, the strategy was to try to get some of the McDonald's money. We figured that was a good way to get into that. But, we saw this really cool way of sharing and upvoting and sharing content early on. And just, a couple of kids that had a great idea and a passion for it. And we bought it, and we let it operate itself independently. And we didn't screw it up, and we just fed it with, a little nurturing and a little money. And, being a branded content company, we shared some of our branding DNA, so I think it's one of the rare technology companies that has a real brand. And we just nurtured it into a big business. This year, over 70 billion page views, 8,000 communities. It's doubling every year, and we're just starting to get into the monetization. So a couple of years ago, when we saw this massive potential with this social business, we spun it out into its own company, gave it its own equity structure so that it could operate and compete with other big social media companies, and it's been a huge success, and I think the future is actually quite bright.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that, and Marco, particularly in Google's case, when do you convert to the name of the mothership, and when do you allow it to keep its own brand? But Bob, you've recently bought some luxury fashion resellers, fashion marketplaces. It looks like a pattern there to me. What can we expect? What are the implications of these e-commerce assets in the Condé Nast entertainment context and other post-print initiatives?
Yeah, so our strategy is basically to carve ourselves out as the premium player in the marketplace at scale. We have 100 million plus audience. 2/3 of it is digital. Most people don't realize now that we're really a media company, that our digital audiences are bigger than our print business. We are focused on building that digital business first and foremost. So when you look at our investment strategy, we're interested in e-commerce and we're interested in unique models. We made investments in some companies that we think are actually kind of neat. But really, when you think about the DNA of our company is that we have these amazing brands. I mean, I walk into the World Trade Center now every day, a very special place, and I look at the elevator bank, and you look at the brands that we have in our building, and it's really something. And so the first thing we really wanted to do is really build those brands out. So our acquisitions are focused on how to build those brands out and how to get them into other platforms. The biggest investments we've made is really in starting up an entertainment group. 3 years ago, I sat in my conference room at Don Ostroff, and we mapped out what an entertainment division could be. And now we have, 3 years later, we have 20 movies set up at studios. We have 4 TV shows in production this year. We have 18 branded digital video channels, 2.3 billion page views in digital video in the first 15 months of operation. It just highlights the power of what great brands can be. And so we're very interested in diversifying ourselves in video and turning that into a really big business for Condé Nast.
Well, I think, and one of the things, just back to the e-commerce and the marketplace, I think that so many publishers have looked at how do you best marry content and commerce, and I think it'd be very, very interesting to watch with the power of your brands how you do that. So we'll look forward to that.
Very carefully.
So, Margot, where do we even begin? Android, YouTube, Motorola, Nest. Your track record of building new markets via acquisition is extraordinarily impressive, to say the least. So some of your acquisitions, as we were just saying, have been folded in to the core offering, while others have maintained an identity outside of the Google brand. How do you think about that? And what is sort of the strategic thinking there?
Well, I think, as being shared before, every company has its DNA. And, we're a tech company, and we start with the user and an absolute mission to use technology to create really automagical experiences that make life simpler and easier. So it doesn't matter whether it's an acquisition or existing product development strategy. It all starts from that same overarching mission. And so if you think about it, every product that you would see in Google's kind of family of businesses, kind of as Larry would say, they have to pass the toothbrush test. You have to want to use it twice a day, and it has to be done by a lot of people. And so if you start thinking about even the more recent acquisitions like Lyft, right, a spoon that helps you, balance if you have Parkinson's, or things like Nest, which really is a better way to be connected to your home and get more out of your life. Each one of these things, exists in that space. And as we think about, how do we bring them into the, the original core Google business, or do we run them separately? We really do that on a case-by-case basis. So if it's an acquisition, say something like DoubleClick or Odometry, where it's really core to our ability to really help to understand that kind of measurement-driven advertising, it makes a lot of sense to bring it in. If it's a situation where it's a great management team, but what we're using is our core computer science capabilities, some of our deep infrastructure skills to help them scale faster in a new area, then it makes less sense, say in the case of a Nest, to bring them in. And so we really think about it. We always stick to that core, of what our mission is, but then we think about how we organize ourselves differently based on what the business is really about.
So that partially answers the next question that I was going to ask you, because I think you are now recognized as, certainly as a technology company, but as a technology company and a media company distinctly. I don't know whether you agree with that, but from an investment standpoint, does that approach factor into, is it technology or is it media, or do you go right back to that overall core that you're just talking about?
Yeah, it's really that same core applies, whether it's for a consumer product, a product for our publishers, or a product For our advertisers, the same core principles apply. I mean, even if I go back to, and we're really willing to make very big bets. So I go back to, you mentioned programmatic before. We made an investment in a company a couple of years ago, in 2010 actually, that had a deep focus on real-time bidding. And at the time, not a lot of people were focused on it, but I think we could see that opportunity. And we were willing to put that, and now we have this huge business. The DoubleClick Bid Manager doubled its volume last year. There's twice as many people doing private exchanges. And so what it's really about is being willing to see that opportunity where technology can really make a fundamental difference in making things more automagical, either whether it's helping consumers make decisions, publishers, or advertisers.
You're using the word automagical? Mm-hmm. I love that.
Automatic.
Automatic. At first, I thought your tongue stuck to the top of your roof.
I mean,
that's
I suppose
great.
at the simplest level,
Automagical.
I mean, I think that's even being at CES, right? I think that's a lot of what we're seeing in the entire, all the connected devices.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think when they really add value, it's about taking different types of unstructured data that you wouldn't have expected and then being more proactive. And I think that's really this next generation of the web and why it's so exciting and why it's possible, as we even started out, being personalized even at scale, because we're able to take these different things that are going on around us, right, and really be able to customize that to where I am now, what I'm interested in, but also a reference point to some of the things I've done before. Of course, always opt in from a consumer perspective. But that is, I think, really the goal of technology. It has to be about making lives simpler and easier, or businesses simpler and easier.
There's always been a lot of talk in the industry about, are you a media company? Are you a technology company for so many people? And, Randy, you just bought, a technology company. I remember years ago, I can't remember how many, 10, 12, 15, when it was Steve Heyer was running Coca-Cola, and he declared it, we're a media company. And it sort of startled everybody, but after a while, you could see that they were certainly a beverage company and a media company. Bob, would you ever think that Condé Nast, would you ever imagine that you would describe Condé Nast as a media and technology company?
We're definitely describing ourselves as a media company, but we are sucking up with technology like you can't believe. I mean, it is such an important part of everything we do. And it's, if you think about it, it's kind of interesting, is that, 100 years ago, when Condé Nast really started, 101 years ago, editors figured out exactly what people should think about and what they should be reading and doing and et cetera. Today, the technology gives us the data and information to take that instinct, that taste, that, what people really feel in their heart is cool, add some science to it to allow you to scale it. And it is magic. And so technology is a huge part of it. It's the biggest growth area in Condé Nast. We're working hard to develop our company as a place where technologists can thrive. But at the end of the day, to your point on DNA, we're a media company. We come to work every day to create the world's best content for the most influential consumers, and that's the DNA of what Condé Nast is all about.
I think one of the things that go with that, though, is, in today's world, you need to have your tech stack that allows you to be a media company. Walmart is a retailer, but Walmart's really a logistics company when you get right down to it. So there's a lot of things that go into and underneath being whatever company you want to be, whether it's a media company, content company, retail company. Is Uber a taxi company or a transportation company? So I think all of that becomes really has to be part of our DNA as companies, which hasn't been historically. You have to be good in technology in order to be able to get your content to consumers. Jay talked about it before as well. Les talked about it. Because if you're not, then you're just going to get overrun, and you may have great content. If you can't get it to people, it doesn't matter. So your tech stack has to really be important, whether it's internal or external. It's not about the IT, right. It's not about IT anymore. It really is about how that technology helps you externally get products to consumers, and also helps you internally have as much transparency so that you can see as much information as possible and ultimately be able to make decisions based on that information in a quick and intelligent way.
And Deb, will we see McDonald's call itself a media company?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, especially here at CES, we're talking so much about content and brands becoming publishers.
Right.
So I was like, Bob, there might be something
exactly.
very
Finally, we're in.
interesting that we could do there, because since it is about the engagement story and where it goes, there's so much convergence happening all across the board. And that's what's really exciting. And how are we all going to help each other get better at it so we all rise up and do things that customers want and engage in. And it's all about sort of, taking the friction out, making everything easier and more relevant. And so even this panel is pretty inspiring on that side. So yes, and we're investing in technology like crazy too. So you can see next year might be a new story again.
And you mentioned we bought a tech company, we bought Truex, but we don't really look at it as a tech company. We look at it as an ad product and innovation company, and especially in our business, and you look at network television or any of it, ad products haven't really changed in 30 years. I mean, 40 years, 50 years. The commercial interruption is still there,
right.
and we know the consumers don't like it. If they have an alternative, they're not going to watch it. And we're seeing that trend go, but we keep focusing on, let's put another commercial interruption in. It's not good for creators. It's not good for anybody. And brands like McDonald's and everyone's, we have to work together to figure out what is the new ad product, innovation. Is it engagement? Is it storytelling? The fact that came out recently, as I think it is, the average length of the most successful viral commercials is not 15 or 30 seconds, it's over 2 minutes.
Right.
Because it's great content, or it's
story,
interesting content, or it's really bad content, depending on what it is.
Right.
But it works, and it gets out there, and people watch it. And I think, we as an industry have to do a much better job figuring out how to get back to a world where you are thinking about the customer, you are thinking about the consumer, you are thinking about the viewer, and you're not feeding them things that they simply don't want, don't like, and by the way, get in the way of great product.
Yeah. I think trying to make the distinction between being a media company who tells stories and being a technology company is almost full circle to where you started about being global versus being personal. They're so linked. Interestingly, in the case of Disney, which, to many people is the ultimate analog brand, right? When they were kids and they thought about it that way, but Walt Disney himself was so interested in technology and the integration of technology that technological innovation is actually core to what the Disney
DNA,
brand is to many people. And once he opened his theme parks, that became crystal clear. But as Bob said, the use of technology today in curating product, if you're doing something like Maker, you have 10 billion views a month. There's absolutely no human way to curate things without the use of technology. And by the way, you take it for granted because without that, you don't have that business. Right. And without that, you don't get to distribute that form of media, or you don't know how to distribute it. And I think the notion that makes its way into how we deliver ad messages is so logical because it's made its way into how we create content and how we bring content to people on both broadcasted and personal basis. The same will happen for advertising. And native advertising is the perfect outcome.
It doesn't really matter whether it's our products or advertising. We're all fighting for the consumer's attention. We're all using every tool we have to get its attention and make that attention span get bigger and bigger and bigger. And when we do that, all the monetization models open up. The consumer will pay you for the content, the advertisers are happy, and then we've got to put all that intellect and tools in place to help our advertisers make sure they get everything that they need and then some.
Margaret, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just think it's a really exciting time. I think all of us are trying to really focus on our user and be inspired by that feedback. And I was thinking about your example. If you look at the top pieces of content on YouTube last year, many of them were from advertisers. And so what exactly is advertising versus content? Really trying to allow the consumer to tell us what they find, right? Either entertains them, informs them, inspires them, talks about an issue. And I think we are so excited about the fact that advertisers, publishers, and others now have the technology to enable them to get closer and closer. And it's just a huge renaissance in creativity. There's so much more content being created. I recently heard, that if you think about it, the consumers are consuming 30 hours of content in a 24-hour day. And it's because they're always on and they're always looking for more information. And with all these devices, it just creates this magic opportunity for content creators to connect in so many different ways and to extend those great franchises in new directions that I think we never really thought was possible before. It started with people like Disney, who took it into many other places, but who knows, right, what we'll be talking about in a couple of years.
Remarkably, we are at the end of our time. I do have one last lightning round question. What are you most excited about in our world in 2015?
So 2015, you know, in my mind, I think this is the year that mobile really hits mainstream. I think everybody's been talking about it, but I think it's now so much at the front. But my hope is that people really start to think about mobile as a behavior, not as a device.
Not as a device, right? Yeah. Randy, 2015.
See, other than Empire launching tonight to big numbers, as somebody's always selling, I think it's the opportunity. I think there's so much disruption going on, there's so much happening, but when you sift through it all, it's creating so much more opportunity in almost every aspect of our business. It's being opened up where we can get to the consumer, where we have more opportunity, where there's more content creators, there's more ways to touch everyone. And then you also have huge engagement of content via mobile and every other way. So I think in an overarching way, it's just that the sheer number of opportunities out there. Now, there's the transition to those opportunities. It's bumpy. It's going to be interesting, but that's what makes it fun.
Deborah,
How to answer that so quickly? We see the opportunity with all of the data that we now have that can transform into a really real, human, more convenient, frictionless, fun experience. And I keep thinking Margot and Waze, which is one of my favorite apps. I just love that, especially since I just moved to Chicago and I can't find my way around. You know, how do you use things like that can now get us to immediately target with something so relevant and useful to our customer that helps them and also brings value to both of us? And that's why this job keeps staying really fun and interesting and exciting.
You know, I've never felt more excited about brand development. Our brands are strong and always have been, but I think the opportunity to continue to expand them, particularly into video, it's unbelievable to see what kind of depth that we got in it. So that's my biggest exciting point.
fantastic. And Jay.
Dare I say Star Wars?
I love that.
What else more could there be?
Okay. Well, I, for one, am looking forward to an automagical 2015 and to move from the Magic Kingdom to those automagical moments. I think we're going to have a terrific year. Thank you very, very much, Jay and Bob, Deborah, Randy, and Margot, and thank you for joining us.